This is the ParentNormal Comedy Podcast, the show that helps imperfect parents laugh when they want to cry.
Play it, DJ.
Welcome to the ParentNormal Comedy Podcast. I'm Chris Cate, and this is part 2 in a 3-part series of the best parenting fails shared on the podcast so far. Now, I realize that best is not really the best word when you're talking about parenting fails, because one parenting fail isn't really better than another one. But it is fun to do best of countdowns. So the takeaway I hope you get from listening to this series isn't that mistakes are no big deal. It's simply that we all make mistakes, and that there's no such thing as a perfect parent. As for the second episode in the series, it features parenting fails number 11 through 20 on the countdown. So make sure you subscribe to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts so you don't miss next week's countdown of the top 10 fails. Now, again with a little help from my friends, let's get back to counting down the parenting fails.
Best of parenting fails.
At number 20 on the countdown is a parenting fail shared by Amy McCready, the founder of Positive Parenting Solutions and the author of the Me Epidemic, who was interviewed in episode 47 of the podcast.
Amy McCready. Number 20.
So my kids are both in college now. My youngest is going to college. And so my kids would tell you it was the time that I forgot to pick them up at school. And of course they still talk about it. Remember that time you forgot to pick us up? But I would say my biggest parenting fail was one time I was having a power struggle with my son over homework. And I said, fine, don't do the homework. And I ripped the homework up. And my child was in 4th grade. Keep in mind, I'm a parenting educator. And the teacher knows that I'm a parenting educator. But I just had a moment. And so I had to go in and face the 4th grade teacher and tell him that the reason Ryan didn't have his homework was because I ripped the paper up. And so you can imagine, I was just totally mortified. But that was just, such a lesson that, we all lose it from time to time. But, you have to face the music and go talk to the teacher with your kid there and let your kid see that, yep, you make mistakes too, but hopefully you can make it right in the end. But that memory still haunts me, Chris, after all these years.
At number 19 on the countdown is a parenting fail shared by stand-up comedian Nick Thune, who was interviewed in episode 6 of the podcast.
Nick Thune. Number 19.
Well, my son chipped his tooth last week, and I took him to the emergency room, and they laughed at me like, you don't need to bring him here for this. He's just going to have a chipped tooth. Nothing that crazy has happened. So far, he's alive, which is a huge bonus. And I did cut his hair. I asked my wife if I could cut his hair, and I guess in her mind, she thought I was saying, can I trim around his ears? So she said yes, but when I was asking her, I was thinking high and tight. So she walked in as I was shaving the side of his head, and that was definitely a fail.
Was that the first haircut you've given?
Yeah, and his first haircut.
And was that
Which apparently it's supposed to be something precious, and I wasn't aware of that.
So you didn't save any of the locks?
No.
Next on the countdown is a parenting fail shared by Sarah Mazes. She was interviewed in episode 41 of the show, and since that time, she's actually become the Vice President of Children's Programming for the Jim Henson Company. So congratulations to her on what sounds like a very cool job, but she's certainly not exempt from a parenting fail.
Sarah Mazes. Number 18.
My biggest parenting fail was a tooth fairy fail. My daughter had lost a tooth. Livy. It was poor Livy. She's the one who gets all the stuff. Livy lost a tooth, and she was talking about the tooth fairy, and she was really excited, and we put it under a pillow, and we made a big deal about it. I passed out and totally forgot to put money under it. And she comes in the morning, she was like, Mom, the tooth fairy didn't come. And thank God for all the improv I've done. I was like, oh my God, we just moved to a new house. And I think that it's possible that the tooth fairy doesn't have our new address. Or what? I think that the tooth fairy, what they have is tooth fairies have different areas that they cover. And so, I think that the new tooth fairy didn't know we were here. I vamped it, totally vamped it. That night, made a big deal. We wrote a note to the tooth fairy being like, welcome, we're new to the neighborhood, blah, blah, blah. And we positioned the little tooth on top of like a bright pink flower on her sheet to make sure the tooth fairy would see it. And we're like, we are ready. Go to sleep, passed out. Wake up the next morning with my daughter pulling on my feet. Mom, the tooth fairy forgot again. I was like, she's in tears, and I'm like, oh my God. And I'm like, I think, finally came up with a whole story about how she was really behind, and a lot of kids in the neighborhood lost their teeth as well that week. And it was just, oh my God, I felt so bad. And so all night that night, we positioned the tooth. We wrote a note. Because it's a new house, the tooth fairy didn't know where to look. We put an arrow on a piece of paper, tooth over here. And I spent the whole night going, don't forget the tooth, don't forget the tooth, don't forget the tooth, don't forget the tooth, don't forget the tooth. Everything I did was just followed by don't forget the tooth, don't forget the tooth. And I finally put like a $20 bill under her pillow. I was like, oh my God.
The next parenting fail in the countdown was shared during episode 12 of the podcast by James Breakwell, known by more than 700,000 people who follow him on Twitter as Exploding Unicorn. His story comes in at number 17.
James Breakwell.
Number 8. Number 7. 8. 17.
Oh, yes. That that toddler of mine. I wrote a joke a long time ago about her going out a doggy door, and she did it once. She was investigating it, and we goaded her into doing it then for a funny picture. That was months ago, and then we forgot about it. It turns out she learned that lesson. She learned it a little too well. And so we've got 2 doggy doors leading out of our house, one to the back porch and then one all the way outside. And we've started losing her. Like, you take your eyes off her for a second and she's out the first doggy door onto the unheated back porch. And the other day, she went out both of them. She ended up locked outside of our house with no socks on in 30-degree weather. Some woman walking by came and knocked on our door that our child was out running in the yard. We told this story to my parents, and they laughed at us and thought we were terrible parents. And we left her with my parents for an hour to go do something. And we came back, and sure enough, she ran out their doggy door out into the rain with no shoes on. So she's an escape artist, so now our poor dogs are sealed outside, so we can't open the doggy doors. She's too intent on breaking out.
The next parenting fail is from episode 54 of the podcast and is shared by Ilana Wiles, the mom behind the Mommy Shorts website and the author of the Mommy Shorts Guide to Remarkably Average Parenting.
Ilana Wiles.
Number 16.
Yeah, I have one moment that I talk about the book that I think is really funny. But it was so when I was potty training my daughter, I walked into her room and there was what looked like this huge poop on the floor. And so I'm not upset if my kid had an accident. I was just really surprised that she didn't tell me so that I could clean it up at the time. So I called my daughter in the room. I said, Mazzy, did you poop on the floor? And she said, no. And I'm sitting there staring at it. So I'm like, Mazzy, did you poop on the floor? And she still was like, she still said no. And I was like, well, I didn't poop on the floor and your dad didn't poop on the floor. So who pooped on the floor? And she was adamant. She's like, I don't know, Mom, but I didn't poop on the floor. So I'm sitting there thinking, not only did she poop on the floor, but she's just flat out lying to me. And that's a whole bigger issue. So I ended up getting this huge wad of paper towels to clean, to pick the thing up. And as I'm about to cup it with the paper towel, I realized it wasn't poop. It was the head of a Monchichi doll that had the hair had fallen off and it was just sitting in this heap on the floor. And so it was this kind of wake up moment to me that sometimes your kid's right and you're wrong. And so sort of turned that whole story around.
At number 15 on the countdown is a parenting fail shared by Greg Page. Now, if that name doesn't sound familiar, I know his band and TV show will, especially for your kids. He's one of the founding members of the Wiggles, who appeared in episode 8 of the podcast.
Greg Page.
Number 15.
Yeah, I can laugh about it, but it's very recent. It's only just this week, actually. Our 6-year-old daughter is always, she gets a little injury and she'll cry and scream, and we try to explain to her, look, really you just, might have stubbed your toe a little bit, and it might hurt a little bit, but there's no need to scream as much as you're screaming. So 2 days ago, she was doing a cartwheel and she landed awkwardly on her foot. And so she screams just like she always does. And we say, Lara, come on, get up. It's not that bad. Come on and walk. And, cutting a long story short, after 2 days, my wife took her to the doctor yesterday, and it turns out she's got a fractured foot. So
oh, no.
So there she is, screaming and carrying on about this sore foot. She said, but I did scream to let you know that it hurt. We said, yeah, but Lara, you scream every time you get hurt. So how do we know when you really are hurt badly? So, there's a bit of a parenting failure. You've got to listen to your kids sometimes.
Next on the list is another stand-up comedian you've probably seen on Comedy Central, The Tonight Show, or wherever else comedians can be seen. He was interviewed in episode 3 of the podcast. His name's Nate Bargatze, and he checks in at number 14 on the countdown.
Nate Bargatze.
Number 14.
Oh, I'm trying to think if she done any, I don't know. I'm sure, I know there's something like, I've hit her head on the door. Like I've made some turns and not like paying attention. And, or you pinch her, put her in a car seat, and, I don't know.
All done that, yeah.
Yeah, it's like typical, like, stuff, like, where you don't, I don't know if there's a big one, where, you get in fights with them, like, it's, they cry, and, like, it's, we probably give her a phone to her, I'll give it to her in a heartbeat if there's any kind of hesitancy. Like, my wife is good at, like, telling her no and disciplining, and I'm like, I would give her, she can have my phone. If she even sort of wants it, I'll be like, here, you can watch whatever you want to watch it.
And next on the countdown is a fail shared by Liz Gumbinner, half of the Cool Mom Picks duo, who appeared in episode 45 of the podcast.
Liz Gumbinner.
Number 13.
Mine involves no hospitalization whatsoever. Yay! But, I think a lot of parents these days, like, fortunately, we had babies before Pinterest, which made things a lot easier. Yeah. It was less comparing ourselves to other people for, like, who could be the perfect parent with all the perfect everything in their lives. And so, I look at Halloween now and how it's become, like, this competitive sports among parents that everybody's, like, trying to come up with the coolest, most creative, most innovative costume for their kids. Well, when my second daughter was about 18 months for Halloween, her dad, my ex at the time, we both kind of forgot to get her a costume, which I know is like, oh, horror. Like, we don't have a costume for our kid. So he went to the costume shop where there's literally one costume left. A giant, itchy, woolly sheep wearing a blue bow tie costume. Like the worst thing ever. We put it in her. I have one picture of her looking absolutely miserable and depressed, and we couldn't get her out the door. She would not go trick-or-treating, and her older sister's waiting, and we didn't know what to do. Like, at the time, it felt like, oh my God, we're the worst parents. So I literally stripped the costume off of her, let her be in her diaper, stuck an apron around her neck, gave her a whisk, and called her the Naked Chef. And she trick-or-treated throughout our building, because in New York City, that's what you do. You trick-or-treat in your building in her diaper and an apron. And everyone who's like, is that a costume? I was like, yeah, she's the Naked Chef. And so I tried to turn it around.
Brilliant. I was like, how is that a fail? I was like, that's the most brilliant thing I've ever heard.
Well, at the time, I felt guilty that her costume was her diaper, I will say.
So a good recovery.
Yeah, we all have fails, and I think mostly it's what you can learn from it and that you don't beat yourself up too much.
At number 12 on the countdown is a parenting fail shared by author Jenn Mann, who was interviewed in episode 5 of the podcast.
Jenn Mann.
Number 12.
Oh gosh, how many can I tell you? I have so many. Well, as I said earlier, really, I think the worst is, I have one of these. I have this in my book too. So I can't even talk. Ugh. So my husband is really, really cheap. And so I buy Christmas presents throughout the year. Like, I make my kids decide early on what they want for Christmas. And I kind of shop on sale when stuff's on sale. And then I put it away. And I used to have one spot where I put everything. But then that's when my kids were not as mobile as they are. But now, they're into everything. And I can't say, don't go in that closet because that's where I keep the presents, because where's the first place they're going to go? So I kind of stuff them all over the house and I hide them. And then literally like the week before Christmas, I start pulling everything out to see what I have and what I still need to get. And I lost the Santa gifts. I could not. And this was when everybody still believed. And so there was no way I could just, and I tried to take them back to Santa and change their ideas and get something different. And I mean, I tried everything. And this is when my husband and I probably had the biggest fight, because this is when he was like, this is why we should not have Santa. And I was like, but he's so fun. So I lost the Santa gifts. And I'm not proud of that moment, but I can laugh about it now. I wasn't laughing that night.
The last parenting fail here in part 2 of the best parenting fails will be shared by Sarah Turner, the British mom known as the Unmumsy Mum, who was interviewed in episode 25 of the podcast.
Sarah Turner.
Number 11.
God, where do I start? I could probably write a whole book just on my own parenting fails. But in terms of things that weren't that funny at the time, but I've learned to laugh back on, I suppose would be with my first son Henry, when he was about 5 or 6 months old. And we actually had a hospital appointment because he suffered really badly from reflux. So he was sick all the time. And we were referred to a paediatrician at the hospital. So you think, you'd go prepared for this hospital appointment. And we got there and they said, we're going to have to weigh him. So if you could, strip him off and get him weighed. So I stripped him off and realised that his nappy was quite full, so he needed a nappy change. And then it was at this point that I realised that I hadn't brought any nappies with me. So I thought, okay, I'm a bit stressed out, it's fine. So I just said to the nurse, I'm really sorry, I forgot to pack any nappies. And she was just kind of looked at me and said, fine, okay, I'll go and get you a nappy. And then she came back and I said, yeah, actually I forgot to pack any baby wipes as well. Have you got any of those? So she potted off again. And this is just a nurse at the hospital kind of having to claw these baby essentials that this baby's mother hadn't packed. And then finally, my darling little Henry then weed all over the trousers that he was wearing. And lo and behold, there was a pair of trousers in the change bag, but not a pair that I'd actively packed. So they were a pair that I would say were about 2 or 3 months too small for him. And I was so mortified at the thought of having to say, I also haven't packed any spare clothes, that I just kind of squeezed him into this pair of jogging bottoms, I think they were, that were practically like cropped trousers, like long shorts, were supposed to be full length, but were obviously, half as big as he was. And then kind of had to do the walk of shame out with this baby who was dressed in ridiculously small attire in the nappy with the white nappy and wipes that had been gifted by the hospital. And it wasn't until I got home that my husband said to me, what exactly did you take in the change bag if it wasn't a change of clothes, wipes and or nappies? And I just it was one of those moments where I just thought, yeah, I'm not actually, I'm not going to win any points at being a mum today. I basically just survived the day and that was that. But yeah, it was all just quite embarrassing and I felt very flustered. And now I can laugh at it and say, yeah, that was me with a change bag. God knows what was in there because it wasn't any changing equipment whatsoever. But yeah, at the time I can remember thinking, I'm just not cut out for this at all.
All right, that's it for part 2 of the best parenting fails shared on the podcast so far. Make sure you're subscribed to the podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, or wherever you listen to podcasts, because you won't want to miss the top 10 parenting fails, which I'll be sharing next week. If you can't wait until the next episode, you can always go back and listen to past episodes at ParentNormal.com. If you're subscribed to the podcast, it's also easy to find those episodes in your feed. Don't forget, you can also get my brand new book, The ParentNormal Crash Course, right now on Amazon.com. If you're on Instagram or Twitter, you can find me at ParentNormal. Again, that's at ParentNormal. If you're on Facebook, you can find me at facebook.com/TheParentNormal. Thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening. Bye-bye.
So, thanks for listening.
I can't really do it.
Yeah, you can. Just say thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening.